Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Straight for the Kill by Winter Austin, narrated by Tiffany Morgan. Prologue. Prelude. 25 years ago. Earl Johnson hated snow. Every year he wished he could move south during the winter like all the other snowbirds, but he couldn't afford it. Not on the meager earnings he made as a farmer, and even that was barely enough to keep him alive. No family, no spouse, and no children, Earl was on his own. Oh, how he detested snow, especially when it covered this winding, snaking road that cut a swath through a thick wooded area. In the dark, Earl barely made out the tracks of a vehicle that had gone before him. The beams of his headlights bounced off the large flakes tumbling from the sky. Driving in this was utter nonsense, and yet he had to do it. Someone had to check on the cows and make sure they found a good place to bed down during this freak autumn snowstorm. Dad-burned snow! As he navigated his 20-year-old Ford around a tight curve, Earl squinted through the murky night. Movement off to the right side of the road caught his attention. He took his foot off the gas and shifted it to tap the brake. The Ford straightened, the headlights cut through the dark, and landed on an odd shape that tottered out of trees and right into the roadway. Earl slammed his foot down on the pedal. He should have known better. The old beast wasn't prepared for quick stops, especially on snow. The tires locked and the vehicle slid into a spin. The truck did a full 360. As the lights slashed over the figure frozen in the middle of the road, Earl glimpsed the sight of a bride? In the next instant, there was a sickening crunch before the tires left the road and the truck rolled several times before coming to rest on its top. Hot radiator fluid hit the snow, steam hissing in the chilled air. Earl struggled to keep his eyes open. His head throbbed. A tickling sensation crept along his neck and cheek. "I shouldn't have left the house," was his last thought as he succumbed to the blackness. But she had watched the accident from the tree line. She took a tentative step back, her hands clasped over her mouth to stuff back the screams clawing at her throat. A hand clamped down on her shoulder and whipped her around. She stared into the two black orbs glaring back at her. "This is your fault." The finality of that statement seared a place in her mind. Her fault. Chapter 1. Day 1, Thursday evening, 2 days before Halloween. The chatter and laughter of trick-or-treaters drifted in through the open windows. A mild autumn breeze lifted the gauzy curtains bracketing the windows. It was a perfect evening for late October, and the kiddos took advantage of the nice weather to beg for their wares. Juniper was holding its trick-or-treat night early this year so parents of the high school football players could watch their boys play in the district playoffs. Eckhart County stood a chance to go far in their division. Sheriff Elizabeth Benoit, one day post-emergency appendectomy surgery, was stationed near the bay window that afforded her a better view of her visitors. She shifted in her recliner and pulled the army-strong fleece throw up to her shoulders as she watched a pair of Marvel superheroines march past the glowing jack-o'-lanterns lining the porch steps. "Trick or treat!" Their voices sing-songed to the man perched on the porch swing. "Well, it's Ms. Marvel and Captain Marvel," Under Sheriff Raphael Rafe Fontaine said. "Out saving the world one candy bar at a time." The girls giggled and held up their Marvel-themed buckets. Rafe tossed in a few fun-sized chocolate bars. From somewhere in the yard, Elizabeth heard a mother holler, "What do you say?" "Thank you," the girls chimed as one. Together they skipped down the steps and disappeared from sight. Elizabeth sighed, wincing when her tender abdomen twinged. As advanced as surgery had become, needing only 3 tiny incisions to remove a festering, dying organ, it still left the patient in pain and fatigued. A warm, wet nose nudged her hand. She slid her palm up and along her faithful companion's head and rubbed the silky ears. Bentley, Elizabeth's red border collie, huffed in contentment, laying her muzzle on Elizabeth's lap. Darkness pressed down on the vestiges of daylight, bringing to life the street lamps lining the sidewalks. In a month's time, the homes along her block and stretching all the way to the town square would be decked out in their best Christmas lights. But for now, Elizabeth's neighbors' yards were a cascade of spooky to goofy. Just 2 doors down, the watering hole, Marnie's bar, was a kaleidoscope of green, white, blue, and orange from the strobe lights she turned on for the kids to stop and get their candy. When tonight's citywide trick-or-treat ended, Elizabeth's sister would resume her duties as bartender and owner with her usual crowd. Her annual All Hallows Eve party would happen Saturday night. Elizabeth doubted she'd make it. Such a shame. She'd been looking forward to it this year. In a weird turn of events, Elizabeth had managed to convince Rafe to do a couple's costume, despite the fact they were not a couple, and go as 2 of her favorite characters in Craig Johnson's mystery series. But alas, that pairing would have to wait until next year. A family of 5 tromped onto the porch, the youngest crawling up the steps dressed as a ladybug with her mama right behind. The older kids declared their intents, Rafe paid reparations, and Elizabeth's home was saved once more from tricks. One of the older girls spotted Elizabeth through the window and waved her sparkly wand. Elizabeth waved back. Rafe rose from his post and came into the house. He held up the empty bowl. "We're out." "That was the last of the candy." "Looks like we're done for the night." He turned off the porch light and took the bowl into the kitchen. "Do you want anything?" Elizabeth waited for him to circle back around the counter partition. He leaned a shoulder into the wall and crossed his arms. Her undersheriff made quite the picture standing like that, giving her drugged-up, hurting body a little thrill. The mutual attraction burned between them, yet they'd never acted on it. Elizabeth was reaching the point where her give-a-damn was busted, and she didn't care what anyone thought about the 2 of them together. With the narcotic leaving her giddy, she just might take the plunge. Except her surgeon had warned her, no extraneous activities for a few weeks. Alas, any thoughts of doing more than kissing Rafe would have to be tabled for now. Sitting here and staring out the window was driving her batty. She clumsily, man, these drugs are a doozy, shoved the fleece blanket aside. "I want to sit outside for a bit." Bentley danced aside, ears perked at the prospect of getting to run outside and greet lagging treaters as they passed the house. Rafe strode across the hardwood floor in a few steps and caught Elizabeth's elbow as she attempted to stand. "Hold on there, High Speed. Let me help." The nickname was a familiar, untimely reminder of her ex-husband and Rafe's older brother. It was a vernacular she'd picked up from Joel, who'd heard it for more than a decade as a soldier in the Army and as a Delta Force operative. He used it to describe Elizabeth because of her tendency to want to be the one to do it herself, lightning fast. Rafe had picked up on the moniker. She wagged her hand, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth at her appendage flapping like a rag in the wind. "I got it." Rafe took a firm hold of her. "No, you don't." Her protest died once they reached her dried-out mouth. Arg, another icky side effect of the narcotic. "Water. I'll get you a glass once we're outside." With measured steps, keeping her back ramrod straight because it eased the pressure on her abdomen and the surgical points, she and Rafe shuffled outside. Once she was seated on the porch swing, she sagged into the plush cushions. Bentley gave a nose tap to her hand, received an assuring pet that all was okay, and the border collie scuttled off the porch to have run of the yard. Rafe stepped inside and was back shortly with a lidded travel cup, ice clinking against the sides. Elizabeth took a drink, relishing the cooling sensation it had on her body. Man, that brief walk out here had caused her to break out in a sweat. Or was this menopause setting in? Couldn't be. She was too young for that, right? Had to be the narcotics. It was a known side effect, this extra warmth. "No more drugs," she muttered. Beside her, Rafe chuckled. "You'll regret that declaration the instant the pain really hits." "I feel like I'm tripping. I don't like it." "You're not going to like hurting more. Give it another day to heal, and then you can just take regular pain meds." She took another long swallow. "How are things at the fort?" "Fine. You need to stop worrying about it. We've got everything handled." "We? As in you and Lila?" "As in all of us." He took her hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. "Been at this long enough we've got the routine down pat. Don't forget, most of us have been in law enforcement far longer than you. Just focus on getting better." Elizabeth let it be. Rafe knew what he was doing, had been chosen as her undersheriff for a reason. She twined her fingers with his and laid her head on his broad, capable shoulder. They sat there watching the candles in her jack-o'-lanterns flicker while Bentley zoomed around the yard, greeting the kids who walked past with joyous barks. A while later, a mid-sized sedan crawled along the street and pulled into the drive. Rafe tensed under her. Elizabeth lifted her head. "Who is that?" "I don't know," he answered softly. Bentley changed course and ran to the bottom of the porch steps. She sat, her shoulders hunched as she lowered her head. The border collie was usually friendly to all save one person, but she had been extra protective of Elizabeth since her surgery. Rafe stood, slipping free of her hold, and moved to the top of the steps. Elizabeth noticed his hand twitching toward his sidearm. Bentley wasn't the only one in protector mode. After a moment, the car's owner stepped out. Even with Rafe blocking part of her view, Elizabeth recognized her visitor. "Serafina? Is that you?" Serafina Russell, a long-ago friend of Marnie's, closed the sedan door and strolled up the drive. "It is. Hey there, Rafe. Is that a costume, or are you really a sheriff?" "Deputy. Undersheriff, actually." His hand fell away from his weapon. All 5 feet 11 inches of lithe woman came to a stop before Bentley. Serafina looked down at the dog. "Will she let me pass?" "Bentley, off." The collie chirped at Serafina, then hightailed it up the steps and scuttled down to her dog bed beside the door. "Guess she approves." Serafina tossed a long, strawberry blonde braid over her shoulder as she joined them on the porch. "She does," Elizabeth said. Serafina patted Rafe's arm. "Looking good there, Raphael." He grunted his response and remained standing at the end of the swing. "Mom mentioned you had come home a few years back." Serafina took a seat on the porch railing across from Elizabeth. "Said you and Joel divorced." "Ancient history." Serafina smiled. "Hard to believe. Joel Fontaine and Elizabeth Benoit were high school sweethearts destined for greatness. Didn't think the two of you would ever split." "Not every relationship can survive on sweetness alone." Elizabeth listed to her left to ease the ache on her right side. "Mom also told me you were the sheriff now." "I am. 2 years next month. I see your mom every now and again. How is she doing?" "Okay, all things considering. I wish she'd move closer to me, but she refuses to leave that old house and the memories. Even the prospect of a nice, assisted living facility that gives her access to disability services isn't enough to make her move." Caroline Russell had been paralyzed in an accident that had taken her husband's life, Serafina's father, when Serafina was a girl. For a decade, it had been a hard slog as Caroline coped with the loss of not only her husband and his steady income, but her inability to care for her 2 young children. About the time things were looking up for Caroline, tragedy struck again. "What brings you to Juniper, Sarah?" Elizabeth asked. The other woman hugged the porch support and leaned into it. "I had vacation time the company told me to take. Oh, the glamorous life of a pharmacist. Decided I should spend it with Mom. Maybe, finally, I could convince her to come with me." "Does Marnie know you're here?" "Not yet. I drove past her bar and noticed it was hopping with kids. You allow kids to trick-or-treat at a bar?" Elizabeth chuckled. "She has the bar part shut down while it's going on. She's usually outside passing out the candy. Believe me, I've gotten an earful from some of our religious community on allowing it. But it was a tradition started before I ever took office, and no one seems to want to cross swords with the man who okayed it in the first place." The growing shadows covered part of Seraphina's face. Elizabeth noticed a shift in the atmosphere. Rafe's radio crackled with a report from Alexis. It broke the odd mood. "You look like you're recovering from something," Seraphina mentioned. Elizabeth placed a hand on her tender abdomen. "Emergency appendectomy. Not fun all around. In fact, it kinda sucks." "I bet." "Well," Seraphina slid off the railing, "I should let you get some rest." "It was nice of you to stop." She smiled, lifting a shoulder. "Thought I'd say hi, let you know I was in town." "How long you here for?" Rafe asked, his gruff voice rumbling through the dark. "Oh, for a few days, I expect." Seraphina skipped down the steps, turned back, and waved at them. "Later, you two." Rafe lingered at the edge of the porch. Once her sedan had disappeared down the street, he resumed his seat beside Elizabeth. "You should probably go back inside and sleep," he said. She sighed and rested her head on his shoulder once more. 5 more minutes, then you can boss me around." Before she took more narcotics to ease her into sleep, she needed a clear head to mull over why Seraphina Russell was back other than the reasons she'd given. Elizabeth wasn't the only one to mark this anniversary. Chapter 2. Eckhart County Deputy Lila Dane located the spot fellow Deputy Ben Fitzgerald told her was a good place to park and watch for underage partiers. Homecoming and Halloween were favorite times for the high schoolers and visiting college students to get drunk and lit up. This piece of land with acres of timber and rolling fields was rented out as prime hunting property and left unsupervised for most of the year. The perfect spot for rebelling teens to get away from adult supervision and let loose. Who cared that tomorrow was a school day? Lila picked a nice hidey spot that gave her a view of the gravel road to her left, where she could see everyone coming and going, and the entrance to the field to her right. The autumn foliage hadn't completely shed back here in the boondocks, and her unmarked, dusky squad car blended in with nature. Positioning the car as she had ensured the oncoming headlights wouldn't bounce off the frame and alert the wayward kids to her presence. But for extra precaution, she'd fixed a special camouflage blind several feet in front of the car. A little something special her boyfriend— could she really call him her boyfriend? Deputy Kyle Lundquist had cooked up. Avid game hunter that Kyle was, he knew exactly what would keep those kids from spotting her. Settled deep in the car seat, Lila rolled her windows down halfway to get a breath of the fresh autumn air and hear approaching vehicles. The partygoers wouldn't arrive until the evening's festivities in town were over and their parents were in bed. She glanced at her phone. A few minutes past 8, which meant she had about an hour before anyone showed up. Enough time to review the case she'd squirreled out of the department. The timing of Sheriff Benoit's emergency surgery and this anniversary couldn't have been better. With Elizabeth gone and Fontaine busy in his caretaker duties, Lila had, with the night dispatcher's help, snuck the case file box out of the sheriff's office. Alexis nearly swallowed her tongue when Lila told her what she was doing, but the last thing Lila needed was for Kyle to find out. They were both on duty tonight, and all it would take was for him to walk in and catch her, and the jig was up. Alexis did her job as lookout. Lila loaded up and got the heck out of Dodge. Lila turned on her phone flashlight and flipped the lid off the banker's box. She grabbed out the top 2 files. Beneath lay a costume encased in a plastic bag. After setting the files on the passenger seat, Lila pulled out the evidence bag and examined the black and red costume. Pirate? Shaking her head, she went to drop it back in the box, but a glint at the bottom gave her pause. She set the costume aside and lifted out 2 evidence baggies with identical black velvet chokers. Dangling from the center of the chokers were clear, oval stones with a red symbol that looked like a diamond with tails. Odd. Lila replaced the baggies and the costume in the box. A quick check of her surroundings revealed she was still alone. She set the files in her lap and dove in. 25 years ago, nearly to the day, after a freak autumn snowstorm, one Bernadette Lundquist was found dead in a field. Preliminary ruling was she had accidentally overdosed and then succumbed to the elements to die of exposure. Notes in the margins, distinctly in Elizabeth's handwriting, stated this ruling was too pat, that the autopsy didn't give any solid indication of how she actually died. Several photos of the young woman as she'd been found in the middle of nowhere on the snow were paper-clipped to the back of the report. By these photos alone, one would surmise the same thing as the coroner at the time. Elizabeth knew something that wasn't stated in these reports or by her own hand. Lila read over the rest of the file. It was no secret Elizabeth had it out for Sheehan when she took office. Recently, Lila had learned, from a slip-up on Kyle's part, that the sheriff's friend's death was the catalyst for her grudge against the old codger. But former Sheriff Kelly Sheehan kept a pocketful of backup plans to protect himself. Unfortunately, no one, save for the disgraced sheriff, knew what those were. The slippery snake had managed to confuse Elizabeth, and her desire to see him behind bars had dimmed. On the flip side, if Kyle knew Lila was reading this, he'd burst a blood vessel. Bernadette was the sister he never spoke of, the one who set him on a path to what he became, and the one whose death had left his younger sister with a severe case of anxiety. The only reason Lila knew his sister's name was because in moments of extreme exhaustion, Kyle would talk in his sleep. Investigator that she was, Lila did some digging in newspaper archives and put two and two together to make four. He, like Elizabeth, kept this part of his life sequestered away. The hypocrite. Lila's brush with a serial killer and her losses were favorite topics Kyle liked to pursue instead of allowing her to pick apart his own. Flapping the file shut, Lila leaned her head against the headrest and checked her surroundings. The distant chatter of canines carried through the window. Either those were coyotes or a pack of feral dogs out hunting. If those bone-headed kids knew about the dogs, why the hell would they ever come out to a place like this? She peeked into the back seat. Yep, her rifle and shotgun were there. Hopefully, there wouldn't be a need for either one. After letting a few moments slip by, still no sounds of wayward partiers arriving, Lila picked up the other file and opened it. This report had nothing to do with Bernadette's death, yet maybe it did. It was unusual in that it was an accident report. On the same night of the snowstorm, a young woman, dressed in a zombie bride costume, was struck by an oncoming truck when she ran into the middle of the road. The truck flipped off the road, coming to rest on its roof. The driver of the truck, one Earl Johnson, was severely injured in the accident and 2 days later died from his injuries. The young woman... A sound outside the car brought Lila's head up. She doused the flashlight on her phone and peered out the window. "Help!" A pair of hands slapped against the window. Lila jolted hard, throwing the file and her phone to the car floor. "What the hell?" Fingers, coated red, grasped the edge of the window and clung. "Please, help!" Her weapon drawn, Lila aimed the pistol at the intruder as she grabbed the door handle. "Back away from the car." "Oh my God, please!" The begging broke into sobs as the female backed away. Lila bolted from her car, her sidearm still pointed at the kneeling girl. The dome light caught on the shiny black fabric the girl wore. "What the ever-loving—" She lifted her face. Lila choked on her orders. The girl's heavily made-up face was streaked with dark stains, her tears making the cat eyes run. "What happened to you?" Lila asked as she holstered her service weapon. She yanked the fake vampire teeth out. "I tried to help, but you have to help her." A cacophony of yowling and barking cut through the night air. What the girl was trying to say penetrated Lila's frozen brain. She spun back to the car, yanked open the back door, and pulled out the shotgun and a mag light. After loading the firearm, she pocketed more shells, then faced the cowering female. "Show me." The girl lifted a trembling hand and pointed back toward the thicker part of the timber. Lila gaped at the darkened maw. "Oh, hell." She grasped her radio. "Alexis, I'm leaving my vehicle to investigate a possible emergency. Send backup to my location." "Copy." "Send a bus, too." "Copy." Lila grabbed the girl's arm and hauled her to her bare feet. No way was she leaving this girl alone with her car. She pushed her forward. "Take me there." Sobbing as she moved, the girl tripped forward, following the gravel road. Lila hefted the shotgun to rest on her shoulder as she scanned the road and their path with the flashlight. Creepy crawlies skittered down her back as they went farther into the woods. This was a huge mistake. The girl veered left and started trotting. Lila followed suit. The racket of the animals grew louder. The flashlight beams reflected off the canine's eyes, casting a yellowish-red glow. The light brought a momentary halt to the fight. Coyotes, not dogs. Lying on the ground among them was a human form, one that they had feasted on, the bloodied snouts a glaring indication. "Shit! Help her!" the girl sobbed. Her shotgun settled in her hands. Lila flipped off the safety. "I'll try." The first blast sent the pack shrieking and scattering, but they refused to leave the body. Lila leveled her sights on the one she deemed the pack leader and fired. The leader went down, and the rest fanned out, but still refused to leave. Lila had her sights on another and put it down as well, sending the remaining animals fleeing for their lives. As the coyotes ran off, she reloaded. "How did this happen?" she demanded. "I don't know," the girl shrieked. She slapped her hands to her face and cried harder. With a shake of her head, Lila drew her sidearm and approached the corpse of the first coyote. Assured it was dead, she checked the other, scanning the area to make sure the rest didn't come back. They probably hadn't gone far, not when they had an easy meal waiting for them. "Deputy Dane, report." "Alexis, ETA on my backup?" "Deputy Fitzgerald is almost there. Ambulance is 10 minutes out." "Fitzgerald?" "I'm at your car," he answered. Lila rotated the flashlight back the way she and the girl had come. "Head west about 400 to 500 yards and hang a sharp left into the trees. We're nearly 50 to 80 yards in." "We who?" "Just hustle your ass. We've got an injured woman, and have a shotgun handy. We got predators." Ignoring his rants, Lila turned the flashlight on the barefoot woman on the ground, dressed in a black and red pirate costume. Her heart took on a different pace. "I'm not liking this," she muttered. The coyotes had managed to mangle the body. The costume she wore ripped open at the abdomen, leaving a gaping wound where her stomach should have been. There were bite marks on her arms and the exposed, fleshy part of her legs, but it didn't appear she had been alive when they had started in on her. She flicked the beam up to the woman's face and grimaced. The young woman's blue eyes were open, wide, frozen in horror, her mouth ajar as if she'd tried to scream. A blood-red wig was barely attached to her dark brown hair. Lila gulped. If she didn't know any better, she'd swear she was staring at one of those photos in the Lundquist file. The beam glinted off a clear stone lying in the hollow of the woman's throat. A whining chatter from the trees made her lift the shotgun. "Come at me, you freaking bastards!" "Dane?" She swiveled around on the balls of her feet. Fitzgerald jogged past the hysterical girl and headed toward her. Lila grasped her radio once more. "Alexis, call Dr. Remington Thorpe and patch me through to Fontaine." "Any message you want me to give the doctor?" "We've got a DOA." Fitzgerald came to a stutter-step stop. He dropped to his knees and gaped at the body on the ground. "Alexis, I want Deputy Lundquist and Sheriff Benoit left out of the loop on this one for now. Copy?" "Deputy Lundquist was paged about the call-out." Turn him around. Fitzgerald met Lila's gaze. He shook his head. Alexis, turn him.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?